Thanks, Brian and Sam. I'm joined now by CPLA Vice President Gandharvika Gopal and Massachusetts Coalition to Prevent Gun Violence Director of Organizing, Angelica. Thank you so much for sitting down with me to talk. Next weekend, you all are hosting a rally in front of the State House to raise awareness about different types of gun violence and the root causes of gun violence in our communities. What can attendees expect to see and hear next weekend in front of the State House?
Definitely. So we're mostly hoping to highlight community voices of survivors and organizers in the Boston area. So most of this rally will be a speaker series. We have a couple different speakers from local organizations, including Angelica. We're very lucky to have her there as one of our speakers. And then a couple other organizations, including the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute, will be represented there. Other than that, we've worked on creating a resource guide for action items and also mental health resources that will be printed out and given out to participants at the rally.
Wow, lots of preparation going into that. CPLA, I read on your Instagram and across your messaging that they've identified gun violence as a public health crisis uniquely affecting young people. How can students better advocate for addressing the root causes of gun violence and within our communities?
Yeah, thank you. And I think one of the most important things that I'd like to allow folks to know, because I think it's important to, when we think of advocacy, to look at the different avenues in which we're able to advocate. So again, acknowledging that that's not always through a legislative means. And first and foremost, I think education is one of the most important parts. And so when we think about how gun violence is uniquely impacting the young people of America, it's important for folks to recognize that that's actually the leading cause of death for American children. In Massachusetts, that's actually the third leading cause of death for children of the Commonwealth. And so keeping that in mind, and also, again, much to Darby's point earlier, being informed on the different types of gun violence that take place, what are accounting for the majority that are taking place here in the Commonwealth, and looking at our numbers and what does that look like throughout the communities most impacted. In addition to that, what I think is super important for students who are looking to advocate on this issue, much like Darby is a part of CPLA, joining organizations like that through their universities, schools, is of the utmost prevalence. Again, getting exposed to different ways in which you can advocate, and then making sure that we can just put that out in community. And so if that happens to be a legislative-based rally, that's a perfect way to do it, but also thinking about the grassroots organizations that have been doing this work and living in the reality for decades, and how can we support those grassroots organizations in community. And specifically for students in the Boston area, there's a bunch of rich different organizations that have been doing the work. I think of folks at the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute. I think of We Are Better Together, and there's a plethora of more, not to exclude any, but many of which are our member organizations. And so thinking about how students can volunteer time, how they can attend events, things of that nature as well, to just be able to uplift and support the work that's being done by community members as well.
Absolutely. And this collaboration seems really important because both organizations seem not only focused on the prevalence of gun violence, but of the root causes. Can you, either one of you, touch a little bit about what those root causes could look like in our community specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. And Angelica can speak more directly to the root causes, but just as you mentioned, like the collaboration between the two of us, I think is very important, and she kind of has that background to provide more insight on like these violence that is happening in communities around us that a lot of students aren't as aware of. So a big focus for this rally was going into it thinking about, we know about the mass shootings, we know about the larger scale gun violence that happens around us and is a lot more reported on in the media. And we kind of want to focus on these very nearby instances of gun violence that we're not often hearing about. And then you can absolutely talk about a little bit those root causes that we're looking to address.
Yeah, happy to talk about those. And so when we think about root causes of gun violence, items that come into play are items such as poverty, systemic racism, lack of opportunity. And so that's something that does not negate us here in the Commonwealth. And so when we look at communities most impacted, we're also looking at where we've seen chronic disinvestment in individuals and in communities, thus resulting in what we're seeing. And so again, when we're thinking about gun violence, we know that it is an issue that also uniquely impacts Black and brown communities. Again, if we look specifically at the Boston area, a vast majority of the gun violence occurs in predominantly Black and brown communities. So when we're referring to the gun violence that's happening in the Boston area, we're looking at the Dorchester, the Roxbury, the Mattapan. And again, that just goes to kind of show the historical context of things like redlining and so forth that have all led to these communities to have some of these inequities that lead to those root causes and to the violence that we're seeing. I'm happy to talk a little bit later in terms of some legislation and things like that we have that reference some of those other additional root causes, but also, again, thinking about our system that involves young people, what does that look like? Language that the coalition does not use is when we think about gang members, gang affiliated, we prefer to use involved youth. But again, thinking about root causes that turn our young people to be involved in those systems, to be involved in the behaviors that they're in, because those root causes are stemming from the lacks and the needs that are within their communities that they were brought up in.
Undoubtedly. And like you said, these solutions go beyond just legislative solutions, but I would be curious, Massachusetts has the sixth strongest gun laws in the country and one of the lowest rates of gun-related deaths. However, like you said, there's such a long way to go. So what can legislators do to attack those root causes and really, work to create safer communities outside of what seems to be at times surface level?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. And so, there's one thing that I can't negate to mention as we talk about that. And so this past fall, we actually had some headway and success around one of the bills that we are in support of this session. So it's the Omnibus Gun Bill, which is a comprehensive gun violence prevention bill that the House actually voted favorably in. And so now we're pointing our advocacy efforts towards the Senate, really to ensure that they can have something that is comparable in that measure. The other items that we look at, or what we structure our legislative priorities as at the coalition, is that we make sure that we focus not solely on the guns. This is a conversation that has come up a plethora of times throughout community conversations that I've had personally, but the need to also look at, again, those root causes. So at the coalition, this past session and in this session, we've segmented our priorities into different buckets. So we do keep one for around the guns themselves, because as you've mentioned, we do have strong laws here in the Commonwealth, but they could be stronger in some instances. There's several items that we were advocating for around ghost guns, firearm industry accountability, things of that nature, just to kind of tighten up some of the measures that we have. But it doesn't negate, again, we roughly lose about 250 individuals due to gun violence here in the Commonwealth. Just this week I heard a number from the AG's new Office for Gun Violence Prevention that about 800 individuals this year alone have been directly impacted through gun violence. So shot fatally and non-fatally, that number is comprehensive of both. When we look at some of the other bills in terms which address root causes, we always look at system-involved youth. So this past session and this session, we maintained the same three. We were looking at juvenile justice reform and thinking about how we can have impact to ensure that our young people have what they need to be safe and well so that the outcomes are reflective. We've actually teamed up fairly closely with our partners at Citizens for Juvenile Justice. I always feel it's important to talk about their work as well in tandem with this, is that we're in support of Raise the Age. So for folks who may not be familiar, that's raising the age in which a young person is considered an adult in the eyes of the law. So from 18 to 21, because we acknowledge that there are more supportive resources in the juvenile justice system than there are in the adult legal system. And so making sure, again, that concept that people have what they need to be safe and well. Then we have expungement and diversion. So expungement that would allow non-criminal, not non-criminal, but to allow certain offenses to be removed from a young person's record, thus removing barriers to things like access to education, housing, and so forth, all these things that people need to be safe and well. And then diversion that would divert more cases out of the criminal legal system altogether, again, keeping those young people out of the system overall and into supportive community services for them. And then we have something that's a bit more unique, so not necessarily just juvenile justice focus. We actually have a bill that's centered around creating a universal basic income for youth aging out of foster care. Again, thinking of the unique needs of that population and what it looks like to set those children up for success. So acknowledging that that monetary need is something that people need in order to progress forward. And so that's how we've been able to segment some of those. We've created a lot of different initiatives at the coalition that even just spark dialogue about this narrative transformations that need to occur and the different dialogues that we want to bring into place. So we've been featuring a film titled This Ain't Normal, which highlights the lives of several young men in the Boston area who were involved youth and kind of their outcomes, but also drilling in, the young people speak it for themselves for folks who have interest in viewing that. We've done several different screenings and will continue to do so, but it really hones in on what are impacting these communities and how community members would like to see change. And so we do that in a couple other different means. Like I said, Emerson's been a great collaborator as well through their transforming narratives of gun violence. We've been able to collaborate there as well to, again, highlight root causes and how we can transform these dominant narratives.
Wow. And it seems like you all are doing so much, and there are so many resources out there and available for students who are looking to get more involved in either of your organizations. What resources are you offering that are available to students, either at Emerson or beyond? And how can they get involved? How can they find out more information and get in touch with each of you?
Yeah, absolutely. And as Angelica just mentioned, the Emerson's Engagement Lab, the Transforming Narratives of Gun Violence Initiative, has been a great resource. That was my professor from that course connected me with Angelica and kind of started this partnership. So I think that's a great opportunity and an example of an institution that is trying to make a very significant impact in the community that they exist within. Emerson's campus is in a very urban environment. So I think it's very important thinking about this environment that you're within and the communities that are in that direct environment or just surrounding the environment. As far as CPLA specifically, we are focusing a lot more on advocacy-based issues this semester. We've kind of established ourselves as a professional organization. We do a lot of work with speaker series or networking in kind of the professional world of communications and law, and part of my position joining the board this semester has been pushing more advocacy and doing more community work and organizing and really connecting with the local resources and organizations that are available.
Angelica, how can other students get involved in your organization beyond just next weekend's rally or through CPLA?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and one of the things that I would definitely just add in addition in terms of the coalition and how folks can engage in our work, social media, our newsletter are going to be the biggest spaces in which folks can engage. Unfortunately, at this time, we don't provide any direct services, so we really uplift our member organizations who do. So for folks who are wanting to have that experience, we have a plethora of member orgs that do that, so that's how folks can engage directly in that way. We publish action alerts through the newsletter and social media, so those are the key ways in which folks can engage in that essence. Now, also in terms of when it comes to students in other universities across the Commonwealth or items like that who may be wanting to put together a rally or just assistance in general around this issue, I am always happy to be a resource myself, really to just extend anything that I have and can. Much to Darby's point, I'm always fairly willing to help work with young people. It's definitely something, I've been with the coalition about 3 years that I keep at my heart and at the forefront is being involved with young people and making sure that youth voices are at the forefront of this work of gun violence prevention. And so I'm always happy to help in any capacity.
Wow. Well, thank you. What a network you both are building. Congratulations again on all of the work that you've accomplished thus far, and good luck next weekend at your rally. Once again, thank you very much, and back to you at the desk.